People have mixed feelings about the holidays, or at least people are mixed about the holidays. Some people love them. They're their favorite times of year: family, frivolity, gifts, music, spirituality. And there are other people who at least have some dread around them. Should I really go to that party? What presents do I give? Oh, what a pain. What am I going to write in my holiday letter? New Year's, I don't have a romantic partner. Do I really want to see my family? There's all kinds of issues. So I wanted to share with you my handy-dandy, very short course, if you will, probably 20 minutes, 25 minutes, who knows, kind of a guide to surviving and just maybe thriving in the holidays. I'll share both the upbeat and the Scroogey of thoughts, but basically I'm going to focus on advice because that's what I do. Think of it as a buffet. Think of it as like the Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner buffet where there's a lot of stuff out there. You don't have to eat it all. If you don't like fruitcake with those green things in them, then just turn that away. First, I want to talk foundationally. This may sound, normally you're supposed to start with the real simple stuff first, but you're an intelligent audience, so I'm going to start with the philosophy of that one might have. There's two kinds of philosophies one could have. I briefly alluded to it at the top, but I want to share a little more. First, I want to start with the sanguine, that is the upbeat, the positive, the hopeful. The holidays are a time that remind us of things that go beyond the quotidian, go beyond the daily. What really is important. These holidays emphasize family, they emphasize gratitude. If you're a Christian, it emphasizes the Christ and all the teachings where love is so primary in Christian teachings. New Year's gives us a chance to make and break our New Year's resolutions, a fresh start. On the other hand, it certainly has become overly commercialized. We start holiday shopping the day after Thanksgiving. Black Friday didn't exist when I was growing up, but now there is this ever-escalating materialism. On the one hand, people call themselves environmentalists, but yet they spend their way, into environmental degradation. Not to mention questioning financial security and getting presents to people who may not need them. Some of them brave the darn traffic to get to the shopping mall and fight over each other to find that you can't even find what you want in the right size, let alone find a parking spot. If you ever got there with the gridlock that probably is ever more likely in today's world in which the government wants us to force us out of our cars and into mass transit, which makes you sardined, and all the rest of it. So there is the upside and the downside in terms of the philosophy, the basis. I want to turn to the question of presents, which I briefly alluded to. Most of the people who watch my podcast are neither super rich nor desperately poor. They're in the working or class or middle class, or my intuition is that most of them are in the upper middle class, and that they skew younger than I am, quite a bit younger than I am. And so they don't have this huge nest egg that they can afford to spend on a lot of stuff. So here is two philosophies of presents. First is the more materialistic version, and then I'm going to be candid and say my version is the non-materialistic version. But I do want to give fair hearing. I believe we live in an era where true intellectual diversity, ideological diversity is absolutely canceled, censored. That what I call the 3 C's. Censored, censured, and canceled. So I don't want to be a hypocrite, and I'm going to share with you my thoughts on both the dominant, certainly American way, which is to get lots of presents, spend lots of money at Christmas, no matter what the credit card looks like come January. So the argument for it is this. We want to make people feel special, and taking the time to think about what to buy each person, even on an extended list, can make people feel special, and it gives them something to look forward to. Throughout the year, we're always in, we have to give and give and give and give, and it's nice to be able to think about maybe getting these presents, and certainly children, many children in our materialistic American society have come to expect a cornucopia of presents come Christmas Day. And by the way, I'm using Christmas for a good reason. Yes, in our desire to be diverse, we talk about Hanukkah, which is actually a very minor Jewish holiday that I think Christians more than Jews prop up to appear as though they're being ecumenical. And I don't know. Frankly, I don't know enough about Hindu. I know Diwali is now, but I don't know what Hindu holidays are around Christmas, or Muslim, whether what holiday, Muslim holidays, and then there's Kwanzaa. But really, whether you're an atheist like I am or religious in whatever there is this certainly this sense that around the year end there's a lot of gift giving. And is that really, and some people would say that's the generous spirit. We should be giving, we should be sharing. And I guess that's the best I can do for making the case for the typical American way of commercial Christmas. But now the other side. Maybe I'm being just too idealistic, but really the holidays have been perverted. They should be more about those larger than quotidian values of caring. It's become a cliche, but peace, love, and goodwill to all. Not that everybody is worthy of goodwill. I think we are all different. We are different. Some of us are much more worthy of goodwill than others. But the notion of slowing down at the holidays, instead of just being maximally productive, but doing something like making a holiday dinner or planning to go to one or getting a nice outfit, and but doing things that are not materialistic, but rather the communal aspect, the sharing aspect, the giving aspect, breaking bread together aspect, bringing family together, even with COVID, hopefully small windows open, gatherings in well-ventilated rooms, perhaps with masks in high COVID areas, but getting together, or it's not really the best, but certainly COVID safer. Virtual get-togethers are still worthwhile for many people. And so this was a subtopic of presents, and for some, forego the presents. It's about getting together and sharing those values that are endemic, if you will, to the holidays. Let's say you don't want to give a lot of presents, but certainly there are alternatives. You can donate money in the name of somebody to what you think their favorite charity is that you would also go along with. I frankly just gave a gift to someone who gave me a lot of his time to help me work through a problem. And I sent, he has money, and I sent $100 in his name to Planned Parenthood, which is something that we both support, even though we're politically very much on the opposite side of the spectrum on that's one charity we both support. So, that's one way to give gifts that without contributing to excess materialism, kind of a liberal approach to gift giving, because most charities are redistributionists to society's have-nots. Another thing is certainly you can make presents. I have a client who's very sweet. She likes to can. She makes the greatest chutney. Really, it's made my mouth water even as I'm speaking. She makes this wonderful chutney. She lives in Maryland, and she sends me a small package of this wonderful chutney. So, and it costs her nothing. She makes probably 20 or 30 of those little jars, mason jars, and sends them to people. That's a lovely present, and certainly more thoughtful than the typical gift card or the traditional socks or sweaters or whatever, which too often end up being something that people don't like and they do have to return. Even through Amazon, it's a little bit of a pain to return things. So you can do that. And then, of course, there's the holiday letter, the e-letter, which too often are too long and too self-aggrandizing. I think they're better done. I'll be just honest. This is what I do with mine. I write an e-card, which I then send to a lot of, maybe 30, 40, 50 people. But it's a little unusual. It's a very brief update on me and my family and I. But the main thing is I enjoy playing the piano, so I play a Christmas carol I make a little YouTube of it, and I send the link, include the link. And I often either write a story, or if not everybody's a writer, but certainly read a story. I think even adults like to be read to. And you can read a story. Now, all that costs nothing. If you're writing a brief update to your family in an e-letter, there's no hassle even with stamps, and it gets sent instantly. And you can include, reading aloud something, or write a poem, or if you draw some little thing that makes it seem more human, and yet it's not contributing to excess materialism. And whether you're low income or high income, you can afford to do that. Anyway, I'm going to take a brief break, just a brief break. It won't take long. So that my announcer can do what she's supposed to do. And I hope you'll stay. After, when I come back, I'm going to talk about some thoughts about being a guest at holiday parties and being a host at holiday parties. I hope you'll stay with me. Be back in a moment. Thank you very much for staying with me. As I promised, I'm doing my various thoughts, sanguine and scroogey, around the holidays. And I talked a little bit about the philosophy of one might have around the holidays, a couple of different approaches, more sanguine, upbeat, and optimistic, and scroogey, and also the spiritual aspect, sort of, but it's hard for me as an atheist to talk very spiritually. I talked a little bit about my thoughts on presents, the case for giving standard American materialistic presents, and then alternatives. But now, as I promised, I want to talk about parties. Thanksgiving parties, Christmas parties. Of course, these days it's called holidays, parties to avoid offending people, winter solstice parties. So some thoughts about being a guest and thoughts about being a host. If you're social and you love doing this, or you need a better job and it's a great networking opportunity, of course you're going to go a lot. But I think more people end up, so often people invite people to parties more out of, I really should invite this person, but they really don't care that much. So you as a guest should also not feel just because you're getting an invitation, you got to go. Look in your soul and ask yourself, should you be going to this party or not? Do you really want to go? Can you respectfully, politely, no one's saying be rude, saying, gee, I've got something else that day. That's not lying. You do have something else that day if you really don't want to go. That way you're going only when you really want to go. Now, in terms of, again, bringing presents, I want to tell a little story that I love. It's how my wife got into UC Berkeley's doctoral program. I was a doctoral student at the time, and one of the professors invited the students and their significant others to the house. So normally people bring wine, but my wife, as I am originally from New York, didn't know that was the thing you had to do. Back in New York, you would bring a cake, very often in one of those bakery boxes with red and white string on it. But she decided she was going to go to a store, I don't know where she got it, but she got a lovely pie plate. Mexican design or Italian design, I don't remember. But it was lovely. And she brought it. Well, the woman who was the professor was so appreciative of being so different, that started a conversation between my wife and her. And by the end of the evening, the professor invited my wife to apply to the PhD program at Berkeley. And it was something she had no plans to do or whatever. And she was a fine student, but getting into a Berkeley PhD program is no joke. And yet, that connection, apparently, not just the social, but apparently this professor was impressed with my wife. And so that's the pie plate story. So my point is, as a guest, if you're going to bring something, do you really need to bring another, be another one of those bottle of wine people? What could you bring that you think the person might like and enjoy? It doesn't have to be expensive. Just think about it before you go. Okay, so now you arrive. Now, people who are very social, it's typically, well, even if you're not social, it's usually wise to arrive early. Why? If you're not social, it's not overwhelming yet. All the people aren't there, so you have a chance to quietly, slowly get into this spirit, talk to people. When there's 30 people already there, even with COVID, it's harder. It can be overwhelming for introverts. And certainly if you're social, then there's a reason to come. You have more time at the party. If you're not social, at least if you come early, it's easier for you to make an excuse to leave early. Because usually, frankly, after an hour, 2 hours, whatever, either the main conversations you've wanted to have are done, or the noise gets so annoying, or you've had your fill of food or whatever, and you're just not that social, you want to leave. So sometimes the smartest thing to do is to come early and leave early. What if you're feeling uncomfortable? There you are standing there and you don't know who to talk to or whatever. It's not a bad idea to prepare a bit. Think about, what are you thinking about these days? just like the 30 minutes before you show up to the party. What are you thinking about these days? What are you looking forward to? Something that you're curious about or you're interested. If you have a little story, it's always good to have a brief anecdote. Nothing long, but 30 seconds to 1 minute anecdote is usually welcome. And so you have those ready to go when you're there at the party. And sometimes the easiest thing, I am an introvert actually, and what's easiest for me is when I go, I will look for a person who's standing by him or herself who looks nice and maybe not particularly physically attractive. We live in such a lookless society that the pretty people always get attention. So I tend to look for people who may not be so physically attractive, who are standing by themselves, and I'm going to feel less threatened. And so I will go over there and I will simply say something like, hi, my name is Marty. How do you know the host or whatever? And I will make what I call an environmental comment. Boy, look at that, it's really raining out there, or boy, that food smells good, or wow, how well decorated. Some little comment about the immediate environment, not climate change. And that usually starts things, and then I listen my butt off and hear what they have to say, and then I'll either build on that or ask that person a question. But the key is listening really well. Now, of course, also the other thing that I screw up all the time, which is good, when I say, hi, I'm Marty Nemko, and they say, I'm Mary Johnson, I tend to go on right away to my question. I don't process the Mary Johnson part, and I've forgotten her name before I even let it penetrate in my brain. So I try, and I don't always do this, to be in the habit of saying, oh, Mary Johnson, nice to meet you. So I'm repeating it. It makes it more likely it's going to stay in my head. No guarantees. What else do I want to say? So, and let's say I get tired of talking with the person, or I don't know what to say, and I just want to get out of there. I will tend to put my hand out if I feel like shaking hands, or if that's inappropriate, I'll nod and say, it's good talking. When the person stops talking, I won't interrupt usually, but I'll say, it was interesting talking with you. I'm going to go grab something to eat. Maybe we'll talk later. And that's a nice, easy way to make your escape. I could talk to somebody else. Or if you're not that assertive, standing there, but, with a drink in your hand, but not clothed, maybe establishing little half seconds of eye contact with people who look friendly, maybe they'll come over to you. And I think that's all I want to say about being a guest. Now I want to talk a little bit about being a host. My wife and I might mention her, no reason I can't mention her name. Her name is Barbara Nemko. I love her, very proud of her. We've been together over 49 years now. It was 49 years in October. 3 years living together, now 46 years come next month of actual marriage. Anyway, we like to make parties. Not big parties, small parties, maybe, 8, 10 people, sometimes just 2 people come over. But when we have a party, and again, if it's COVID, we spread out, we have the windows open, and, we ask people to be vaccinated, all the rest of it. But what we have a philosophy. First of all, we like to serve champagne because it somehow creates a celebratory mood. And we have we don't have full sets of champagne glasses, we have different kinds. We have people pick their own, they seem to enjoy that. So, and because we want to be able to be present in talking to people, I usually ask one of the early arrivers, especially those who seem shy, if they would help pour champagne, so that frees me up to talk to people. My wife's the cook. I can't cook worth squat, so she makes stuff. I won't bore you with the details. But what we've noticed that after about an hour, the conversation starts to wane. So we always have an activity, one or more. So I'll just toss out a few. And it's not just like at Thanksgiving, let's go around the table and say what we're grateful for. And by the way, people like buffets more than sit-down dinners. They want to be able to move around. And so it also is less work. So if we're making Thanksgiving, we put it all out on an end table and people take, and then they can go where they want. They can sit in pairs in the living room, or we have a little sunroom off of our living room, or in the dining room, or they can stand. And that way people are, have a lot of freedom, and it really is nice rather than when you're sitting, you're stuck. That has worked very well. We keep music, not loud music, but soft music playing throughout, which just creates the right atmosphere without it making people having to yell to talk. But then after about an hour, we sense that the conversation is starting to lull. And then we have an activity, and here's just some choices. So again, it's beyond just the Thanksgiving, let's go around the table and say, what you're grateful for, which we do too. But we also do games like blind tastings. We do cheap wine, like $2 Chuck versus expensive bottle of wine. We will do a cheap pair of pants with an expensive pair of pants. We will do cheap chocolate, like Dove chocolate, versus expensive, like Godiva chocolate. We will do cheap ice cream, like Breyers, with against expensive ice cream, like Haagen-Dazs. And we break people up to teams. We don't want to embarrass anybody. So we have teams vote as to which they think is the cheap one, which is the expensive one. And I give prizes. We have a little wine cellar, and so anybody who, the team that wins, they all get to go down to the wine cellar and pick whatever bottle they want. We don't have expensive wines, but just, it's fun. Again, it makes it really fun. Another way we've done scavenger hunts where we tend to send teams around the neighborhood. We act out plays like one Christmas. I printed out a very abbreviated version of the Christmas Carol, and different people played parts, and Scrooge and Tiny Tim and the Three Ghosts and all the rest of it. And that was fun. But they're usually about 15 minutes. We don't make these things long, just brief activities. And I play the piano, so I usually, if we're then serving dessert, I will usually play the piano, Christmas carols if it's Christmas, New Year's stuff I'll play, Auld Lang Syne or whatever, as they're having dessert. And then, as an introvert, we kind of give little subtle signals that around the 3-hour mark, I start to clean up a little bit, and that kind of gives the first wave, at least, of people the signal that maybe it's time to leave. And those are my thoughts about parties. In any event, those are my sanguine and Scroogey thoughts about the holidays. Just to briefly recap, in terms of philosophy, there really are a full range of philosophies, from the very spiritual and non-materialistic to the very secular and materialistic. There are good reasons to celebrate both the material, but especially, we do live in an ever more difficult society to succeed in. And so slowing down at the holidays to get together with friends and family are great, and remind ourselves about just timeless values, whether you're religious or you're not. With regard to presents, yes, you may want to do the typical American commercial presents thing, but often there are more appreciated, less time-consuming, less expensive approaches, from thoughtful e-cards that you would include some creative thing, whether it be a little poem or a little story, or simply read something aloud. You create a little YouTube video, or some little present you make yourself, like I mentioned, that wonderful friend of mine who makes delicious chutney and mails little jars to everybody. My thoughts about guests: learning to just say no sometimes when so you're not always going to so many parties and you don't really want to. The idea of coming early and leaving early if you are not a great party person is usually a good idea. The idea of coming prepared with some things to talk about, something you're looking forward to, something you're thinking about, something like that, and maybe a 1-minute anecdote, so you don't run out of things to talk about. And then as a host, think about the idea of, yes, generally doing buffets, and potluck saves a lot of work, and then after roughly an hour, having some kind of an activity that picks up the lull that tends to occur after an hour. In any event, I do thank you for watching. As I end every YouTube video and every one of these podcasts, this is Marty Nemko reminding you that we find comfort among those who agree with us, growth among those who don't.